Hi there. I want to welcome you to the Heart of Health and Science podcast. I'm so excited about this episode today because we're talking to nurses who are newer to the field of nursing, newer to that front line, newer to that bedside care, and they're going to be able to share what it's like to go from their school to the field of nursing into the profession of nursing and what it's like on a day-to-day basis to provide that excellent high-quality care that nursing is known to provide. So I want to welcome our guests to the show, and I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I'm Jason Roy, new grad, just graduated, 2024 from Park University. I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you here. And now you.
I'm Lizzie. I am also a new grad. I graduated in 2023 from Park University as well. I'm also excited to be here.
I'm just so excited about our conversation today. I don't know how much you know about my history in nursing, but I've been a nurse for I will say a very long time. That's as far as I'll go with that. But when I started, I went into critical care. And I worked in critical care for probably 5 years. And in the hospital I was working, I went in as a critical care float. And so I was able to work in surgical, critical care, medical ICU, cardiovascular ICU, general, and then we had a step-down unit. And so I was able to be oriented, trained in all of those areas. And I was really well-rounded in that critical care. 5 years is not that much experience to gain in all of those areas. But we had a really great support structure there, and I was able to really learn a lot. After that 5 years, I went over to the world of OB, and I was in high-risk OB at that time, spent several years there. Then I wanted to go back to school because I wanted to, by that time I had seen things that I thought we can maybe do differently. For example, in documentation. There's a lot of documentation in nursing. We have to document the care that we provide. And I saw a lot of duplicate documentation, a lot of things that I considered to be a waste of time. And so I said, somebody should do something about this. And so finally, after several months of saying that, I was talking to someone in the break room and I said, we're having to double document. We're having to, this and this and this. Somebody should do something about it. And she said, well, you see it and you see the solutions. Maybe you should do something about it. And I just looked at her and I thought, well, maybe she's right. And so I went back to school, earned a master's in nursing with a minor in administration. And I went into a leadership role. And in that role, I was able to just really get acclimated and oriented to the entirety of the hospital. And so I was oriented to the emergency department, and I worked there for a period of time, worked in peds, worked in NICU, PICU. I mean, I got really well-rounded in those areas. And I love everything there is about nursing. You have this personal contact with the patients that you would never otherwise have. No other field has the level of intimacy, if you will, with someone. We can help educate them about their health. We can help bring them back to a state of wellness as much as can be achieved. So that's a little bit about my story, a lot of years condensed into a short story. So I want to ask you to do the same. So share a little bit of your background and what brought you into nursing.
It's kind of a story. It's kind of loaded because there's so much to it. I came from a very non-traditional background. I didn't graduate high school and go right to college with a stream to be a nurse. It was more of a kind of figure things out and see what I like and kind of see where I land. My parents are both in healthcare. My dad's a nurse, my mom's a nurse. And growing up, they were like, this is what you're going to do. This is what you're going to do. This is what pays well. Nursing is it. And that wasn't me. I rebelled a lot and I didn't apply myself in school, didn't get in college, and I ended up in the Marines. So did some time in the Marines. I got out and yeah, it was a good way to grow up. And it gave me the tools I needed, and I apply everything that I learned from the Marine Corps to what I do now because my work ethic stems from that. So I got out and I really wasn't sure where I was going to go with life, and I still wasn't sure about healthcare. but someone convinced me, hey, you can either, my mom was like, you can go work in Alaska on a crab boat because we have a cousin that like needs a person to work there, or you can go to EMT school. I was like, maybe I'll go to EMT school. And I loved it. I loved working in EMS. And that was my first introduction to healthcare. And I realized that this was something I really enjoyed doing because, like you said, that intimacy of being able to help people is what really got me into it. And there was this little thing of like, okay, what do I do next? I worked 911 in Monterey County out in California, and I did that, loved it until I burned out, because in healthcare, when you love something, you work so much, you get to a point where you burn out from it. And so I was very well aware of where things were going. I had this dream to be a paramedic and to work for like San Francisco Fire and make money doing that. And in 2017, I went on this road trip to go from like California to Ohio. And on the way to Dallas, there's a big hurricane that hit in Texas. And this was in 2017. And so all of Southeast Texas was flooded. Rather than going to Dallas, we decided to go help out. And so that was kind of my very first intro into relief work, like disaster relief. And so, my buddy and I were like, all right, we'll spend 2 days. We'll pass some food around. We're EMTs, let's do something. And he left after 2 days. I stayed for a month. So I bounced around. I did like security. I did triage for the National Guard when they set up a field hospital. I did water rescues with the Cajun Navy. I did like armed hotel security for this family because, there was looting going on. And this guy was like, hey, you're a veteran. Like, would you help us feel safer? And we're like, let's do that. And I came home like revitalized in healthcare because I was already burning out and I was looking for an out. And so that kind of lit a spark, and I was kind of thinking, okay, I might want to do something more with that. And a lot of the nurses I worked with in that month were like, don't be a firefighter, go be a nurse, like go to nursing school. And I was like, I don't know, I don't think I'm smart enough. And so that December, I came home from shift, and a nonprofit that kind of took me in for that month said, hey, if you got something in the mail, your dad's got it for you, and don't hang up, put it on speaker. So I walk in and I'm like, what is this? Is this a prank? And
Is it a setup?
It's a setup, right? And it turns out it was my parents handed me like a manila envelope, and it had like the White House seal on it. And so the nonprofit that had taken me in wrote like a commendation to like the White House for a medal, and I got awarded the Presidential Volunteer Service Award because of that.
Wow.
Yeah, so it came in a citation, a manila envelope, and I pulled out, it was like the White House letterhead signed with a whole thing and that medal. And so it's framed at, my parents' house. And so I took that as a sign, right? And I was like, okay, I think I need to do something with this because this is a great thing that just happened. And so I quit working on the ambulance and did some relief work overseas. I was with some nonprofits. I worked with a bunch of nurses in Puerto Rico, Indonesia, the Virgin Islands, and Philippines. And when I came back in 2018, like end of 2018, I told my parents, okay, I'm going to do nursing school. Like no matter what, we're doing this. I was starting classes in 2020. So I ended up in Kansas City somehow at Park University and worked through COVID. I worked as an EMT. We did a COVID deployment from Kansas City to New York. We drove our ambulances from Kansas all the way to New York City, and for a month we did a FEMA deployment. So I did 911 BLS in Brooklyn, and that was a time. And so it was a crazy time, but it was kind of like my Super Bowl because I've done everything I could as an EMT, from 911 to relief work, and there wasn't one moment in that deployment where I didn't know what to do next. And I think that really solidified that, okay, nursing is kind of where I need to have that fresh reset and really apply everything I've learned to this. And, I might be a new grad on paper, but I come with a lot of healthcare experience, and that's kind of how I got here. So I love it. Like I love what we get to do. I love the time that we get with our patients because I'm so used to a 30, 35, 45 minute, pick up at the house, drop off in the ER. Whereas now I have 12 hours to see interventions play out, to really connect. And I think that's the best part about this type of job.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah, that was a lot longer on the drive here when I was saying it out loud. So, yeah.
Well, I know that when COVID first came, I never know how to say that. It first hit, it first arrived, it first came. I was doing interim leadership work, and I had contracts, I was working from one contract to the next. Typically, my contracts extended wherever it was that I was working at the time. But then when the COVID surges started and hospitals started really changing the way that they were doing business, and they started shutting down, elective surgeries or shutting down elective anything, and just having people who had to be in the hospital at the hospital. Contracts disappeared. All of the needs were filled internally, and traveling stopped. But then I got a call from New York saying we need someone to come and partner with our CNO because he's here and he's working 20 hours a day and he's completely exhausted, and we need an experienced CNO to offset him. So he was going to be working 12 hours of the day, and then I was going to relieve him and do 12 hours in the night. That way they would have a CNO on site, and then we would do our handoff, and it would be more seamless for them. And it was the hospital that had the big ship that came in. Is that where you were?
Yeah, that was the USN like Health and Comfort, and that So it's funny watching like documentaries about COVID in New York at the same time, because a lot of it focuses on like the hospitals and what was going on. I was there, but on the ambulance side, so we were picking people up from their houses who were COVID positive, and we had like no PPE. We ran out of Narcan. We were running out of oxygen bottles because of the amount of times we were doing CPR. And buildings in New York City don't have elevators that fit stretchers. And so we're carrying most of these people down flights of stairs. And, that could be a whole podcast in itself of that experience, but it was like my proving ground for me, because even though it was such a crazy, crazy time, I felt so confident in my skills. And I want to get to that point in nursing where, I see a patient, I see someone sick, I can figure out or work my way through a problem, and I look forward to getting that point again.
Yeah, and nursing is so amazing. Actually, it gives you the foundation to be able to do exactly what you just described.
Exactly. Yeah.
It really does. Wow. I had no idea that was your background. That's an amazing background. Lizzie, share with us. I was more of a traditional student. I did not have that until I married the military. And then that, I was able to have different experiences through that. Certainly not those type of experience. I don't have a medal, for example, from the president. That's incredible. Congratulations.
I wasn't expecting it. I mean, a lot of nursing is like selfless. I didn't stay for a month because I wanted to get something out of it or to get recognition. I genuinely felt that, hey, I'm an EMT, I can do something more. And anyone who wants to help, get your EMT, and you can do, like, what I did wasn't impossible. You can go to Florida right now with the storms and find something to do. A lot to do.
Lizzie, share with us a little about your story, what brought you into nursing. And you've been in for a little over a year now. Yes. So what brought you into the field of nursing, and what is sustaining you so far?
So I had a much more traditional path. I went through high school and I went to my prereqs in college at Park University. Originally what brought me in, I had a family member who was in and out of the hospital a lot when I was a kid. And I was also in the hospital a little bit when I was a kid. And so I just remember all the nurses, and not so much the doctors, but definitely the nurses, who would bring in the little stuffed animals. I still have a little purple hippo named Rosie. And she was, one of the nurses gave her to me, and they always made me feel so warm, and like just that warm, tingly feeling. And you're just like, oh my gosh, I feel so cared for right now. Just wonderful. Mm-hmm. And so then my sister actually ended up going to nursing school as well. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll try that out. And so I just kind of went that way and made my way over to Liberty after working as a CNA in nursing school at a different local hospital. And then I did a flu shot clinic at Liberty and met Heather, one of our educators. Yeah. She's wonderful.
She's incredible.
Yes. And she told me about like the Earn While You Learn program. And so I switched over to Liberty, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you made that switch.
Me too.
I mean, your journey has been really a lot of fun to follow. Your time here at Liberty Hospital has been. So I'm glad you brought in the Earn While You Learn program. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want, just share with us, what that is and what your experience was with that program.
So my experience was awesome. So you come in nursing school as a nursing student, you become a student nurse tech, and you basically get paid for your capstone pretty much. And you work there at the same time as, like I said, a student nurse tech. And I did my capstone over in the birthing center, and it was just so much fun. It was amazing, and I loved everyone I met, and I still love them.
But you really do make really great connections. I was a CNA prior to going into nursing. That's how I paid for nursing school.
Yeah.
Actually, I worked nights and holidays and weekends while I was in nursing school. And I think it made me a better nurse, because I saw the CNAs do care that is the most vulnerable and the most intimate with a patient. If they are unable to get out of bed on their own and go to the restroom on their own, it's typically that CNA or in our case, the patient care tech, that helps them get out of bed and helps them get into the restroom, or helps them shower, or helps get cleaned up, or helps prepare their food on their tray for them so that they can have that nourishment. Get them out of the bed and get them into the chair, and they tidy up the room to make it a more of a healing environment for them while they're in the hospital. I was able to do all of those things while I was in nursing school, which is exactly what the Earn While You Learn program allows. And I really think that just having that level of interaction with patients while the nurses were, doing those things that I wasn't able to do. They were doing the assessments and developing their plan of care for that patient, and they were passing the medications, doing the education, doing the procedures, or those cares. I was doing the things that the patients very basically needed, right? And when I was able to go from being a tech or a CNA to being an RN, I carried that with me. And I incorporated those responsibilities into what I was doing as a nurse. And, it was fun to go from, one area of care to the next. And to keep continually to grow. Now, were you in the Earn While You Learn program as well?
Yeah, and I want to add too. It's when you're in nursing school, you're constantly learning new things every semester, and you're just full of knowledge. And when the nurses you work with on the floor as a student nurse tech know that, they're more likely to answer all of your questions about school and why certain the patho of a patient, stuff like that. And so there's been many times where I'd do all of my work and there'd be some downtime. I'd ask, hey, why are you giving this med, or why is this person this way, and why are they here? And so the exposure of being able to see different floors and to learn from different nurses and how they do things, and kind of their habits throughout the shift and what they do, I think that's really powerful to see, because you kind of pick and choose over time what you want to do and what you want to incorporate. And nurses are always wanting to kind of share their experiences and this is what you can do, or this is how I do things. And so if you feel like this is something you like, then take that. And everyone's been so welcoming at Liberty for that.
One of the things about the Earn While You Learn program is that, it's with schools that we partner with, and you're able to come in while you're in nursing school. You've completed the fundamentals of nursing courses, and then you're able to come in and do a little bit more, have more responsibilities than our techs do that are not in nursing school or have not completed the fundamentals of nursing yet. And you get paid just a little bit more, and you get more exposure to things. The nurses, exactly what you said, they'll bring you in to procedures and say, now, I know that you can't do this yet, but this is how we do it. So I want you to stay here and be present while this is happening. So then when you are able to do it, it won't be the first time you've seen it. So it's a really good program, and we developed it very intentionally for exactly that reason. We wanted the people who are in nursing school, nursing students, to come and say, hey, I can be paid to use the skills that I'm learning, and I can develop those skills. I can continue to be taught by the existing registered nurses. And this is a really great place to work, actually. So we're trying to develop a pathway for people to come in and work at the hospital to help us serve the patients from our community. And, clearly it's working. And it's, I mean, both of you have developed such a reputation already in a short amount of time for excellence in nursing already. I mean, I know, you were in residency, and when you graduated, I mean, the project that you did during residency was great, and graduation was so much fun. Do you want to talk just a little? I know I'm hitting you cold with this. Talk a little bit about the evidence-based project, the research project that you did for your residency program.
Sure. Yeah. So I did it with a couple other people that I work with, and we did it based off of the IV catheters and to see which one would be better. And mostly it's for our patients and also for our nursing staff to not have to keep replacing the peripheral IVs. But I think it was more so about like patient satisfaction, because I can't tell you how many times patients say the worst part of coming to the hospital is getting an IV, because that poke is like, it's not like other pokes. It's different.
It's different.
It's the mental part of it, I think. And so we were looking at like the BD Nexia IV catheter. And I think that we are actually kind of looking at using that at Liberty or something like it, to where it's a closed system peripheral IV catheter. So instead of connecting the catheter to the J loop, it's already all connected. And so you put the catheter in, the needle draws back, and you're done.
You're done.
And it's so much simpler, much easier, and at least that's the hope. And it helps with like drawing blood cultures, less contamination, stuff like that. It's overall, it seems like a really good system for patient satisfaction and employee satisfaction.
So I love everything that you just said. That was such a great project. I want to just highlight two things about what you just said. The listeners that we have with our podcast, some are in healthcare, some are not in healthcare, some are thinking about it, and they're listening a little bit to the conversations that we get to have here. They have no idea what you just said. So basically, you did some research on how can we start an IV on each person fewer times, and how can it be the safest process possible? That's basically what you said. So we also talked about residency and an evidence-based project, and I want to give both of you an opportunity to talk about that. I know you recently completed what we're calling residency, and you're currently in residency. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about your experience in residency and the completion of it, and what it's about, and then we'll come to you and you can tell us what your experience has been thus far.
So for me, residency is like continued education in more of a clinical setting. So you come to the hospital, you do your normal shifts, your orientation, all that good stuff when you first start. And then once a month, you go and you meet with educators, and we meet with you and other unit managers, just kind of everyone throughout the hospital, just to learn about different processes, what different people do. I know we took a charge nurse class, as well as just other education-wise. Respiratory came and talked to us. We did EKG classes, lots of different stuff, just to make sure you have a well-rounded education about what goes on in the hospital and how you can be a better nurse.
Right. It's a year-long program that we invite all of our nurses who just have graduated from nursing school to come into. All of them actually come into this program. And it's a year-long program, just like Lizzie just said, a year-long program. They meet for 1 day a month, all together. So if we have 40 nurses that have recently graduated from nursing school, they all come together and they can share experiences about their orientation, about what they're learning, what they're seeing. And then we bring subject matter experts to them to share more information about the different types of care that happen in the hospital, as well as answer any questions and give them tips of the trade, if you will. It develops camaraderie among this group of nurses. It helps them to share their experiences, to say, this is how I handled a situation. What would you have done? And the expert would be in the room to help guide those conversations. So it's really helping to strengthen the abilities that each of our nurses come in with, and to really highlight that knowledge that you have and get all of that knowledge that's in your head because there's so much knowledge now in your head, to get it out of your head and into your hands so that you can then use your hands to provide that care for the patients. So residency, nurse residency, is very deliberate. It's very pointed to be a next step for nurses to get into the field of nursing and to feel that continued support the entire time. So that's a little bit about what the purpose is, how we developed it, why we developed it. So we've had the opportunity to talk about pre-nursing experiences, what brought you to the field, what you're experiencing while in the field. I want to just switch gears just a little bit and ask you about, what do you see as some of the largest challenges within nursing specifically? And even though we have some challenges there, what are the things that still bring you hope for nursing and the future of healthcare? So I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah. So, man, COVID did a wonder on the nursing field. A lot of experienced nurses, a lot of nurses that my relatives who are nurses in California, a lot of those nurses left the field because of COVID. I mean, it was just a crazy time, and that left such a big shortage in that. And because of that, travel nursing became really attractive for a lot of people. I think with my observations so far that I've seen in nursing, I think a big challenge is hospitals retaining their experienced nurses, because, and that's such a broad question, right? Like, how do we keep our experienced nurses? What's gonna, how do we get them to stay on our floors? And I think one of the biggest things is what's incentivizing me as a new grad to stay after my contract, right? You have your, I'm 30, right? And I'm looking to settle down. I'm looking for a home. I'm looking for a place to stay. But for your average 22-year-old new grad, they do their 2 years on the floor. What's stopping them from taking a contract in Nashville, Tennessee, in New York, in Hawaii, Alaska, of all places? And so I think the first step would be saying, how do we get them to stay, because, insurance and 401ks are great. Tuition reimbursements are great, but a 22-year-old isn't really looking at that at that age. And I think that if you can solve that problem to keep your experienced as nurses in, that helps everybody, because I, as a new grad, depend on those experienced nurses on the floor. And when you don't really see a whole lot of them running around, it's tough. And I really do hope that changes. I hope that hospitals do something to incentivize people to stay longer. And I think that's my answer to that.
Yeah, to really find out what that basic need is, that basic, I don't know, what will fulfill you the most to just, we need your expertise here. And how can we make sure that happens?
Because you end up in the cycle of essentially new grads teaching new grads. You have preceptors that have been nurses for only so many years, when typically that role is reserved for people who have really been there and done that for a great amount of time. And that cycle just continues, because again, after 2 years, what's keeping people from staying? And I think that's just a big question for people, all the administrators out there to kind of ask in their meetings. How do we get these nurses to stay for longer than their sign-on bonuses? And I think once that gets solved, whether it's better incentives, better staffing, whatever that is, I think that's a great step in the right direction. Because there was a time where you did have your experienced nurses, and there was kind of like a hierarchy of you become a new grad, you get your experience, and that's the case. But a lot of people are leaving for travel contracts, and maybe travel, nursing might not be that great, and it won't be as lucrative at some point, and that would probably help a lot. But again, if you're 22 years old and you do your 2 years, I'd work at Nashville. I'd work in New York if I've only been in the Midwest. So I think that's a challenge.
Yeah. On one hand, it's great for the nursing field because it's keeping nurses in the field of nursing.
Right.
And, there are needs all over the country. But I really want to focus on the needs that we have here in the Northland, right? I want the best nurses here. And our nurses are incredible. Their heart for nursing and their heart for patients and their knowledge base. It's just truly impressive and truly impressive. Now, did you talk about what brings you hope for healthcare and nursing?
Yeah. So, man, it's interesting when you work with people in healthcare, because everyone's basically cut from the same cloth. You meet people who love what they do, and yes, money does play a big factor, obviously. But people who work in healthcare, there's a reason why they still show up on time. They clock in on time every day. They're scheduled, and not many fields exist where you can really help people. I think we're really fortunate in healthcare that, you know, we get to help others in a way that most people don't get the chance. I mean, I could have been in finance, I could have been a crab fisherman, I could have done all kinds of things. But what brings me to work is when I get off out of my shift and I round on my patients to say bye, and they say, "Oh, are you coming back tonight?" Like, no, I'm probably going to be somewhere else, or I have the day off, and they say, like, "Thank you for taking care of me." For someone to genuinely say thank you for taking care of me, I think that matters. And I think a lot of nurses resonate with that type of feeling. And I hope, you know, I hope that brings people in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. Lizzie, I want to ask you the exact same question.
Yeah, healthcare is a really demanding job, physically, mentally, emotionally. You know, you're responsible for 5 to 6 people for 12 hours, and that could take a toll on you. So I think for me, at least, the biggest challenge personally and also professionally is setting boundaries with not just your patients, but also coworkers and managers, everybody. You know, you have to be able to know your own limitations and know when, if someone is mistreating you or if a patient is being violent or aggressive, because we do take care of those people. Even those people need care. Everybody needs health care. So when you have patients like that, you have to be able to say, "Hey, this is not how we treat people. You're in the hospital.
Not okay.
Yes, this is not okay behavior. You're in the hospital. I'm here to take care of you. All I have is your best interest in mind." So kind of reminding people of that, I feel like is the hardest, because it can kind of feel mean sometimes because, you know, they're sick, they're not feeling good. Of course, you'd be upset too, and maybe you'd lash out like that, but just kind of being able to speak up for yourself and say, "Hey, this isn't okay." Yeah. And then what gives me hope is kind of the same as Jason, like going back through the hallway in the morning with your bags and being like, "Hey, bye, I'll see you tonight," or "I hope you have a good weekend, I won't be back." And they're just like, "Oh my gosh, I'll miss you." That's always the cutest when they say, "Oh, I'll miss you."
Yeah. I think I could just sit and talk to you guys for hours and hours and hours. Unfortunately, we're winding down on our time together here today. I have one final question, which is always my favorite question. And that is, what is your favorite story about your experience as a nurse so far?
You go first.
All right. I think there was a time when I, like, one of my first orientation shifts at Liberty, I've up until this point, I've been so used to checking in with my preceptor and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go give this med. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that." And there was this night where I didn't have to do that. I walked in the med room, I went into the Pyxis unsupervised, and I pulled out Tylenol of all meds. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, I'm doing this. You know, I remember reading this quote somewhere online, and it said that, you know, you right now are where you wished you were 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, I was considering going to nursing school. Like, I had this plan to start this process to relocate from the West Coast to come here. And here I am in this Pyxis in the Midwest pulling Tylenol unsupervised. And it was like emotional for me because I wasn't, you know, looking over my shoulder saying, "Hey, I got to do this." And I gave the medicine. I scanned it. I did the things and did my assessment like I should be as a nurse. And it all kind of fell in place. And it was just overwhelming. So simple. I like called my dad after work because he's a nurse. Like, "Dad, like I did it. Like I'm doing the things." He's like, "You just give Tylenol. It's not a big deal." But
No, it is.
it is. Like, you don't understand, like, nursing school is not easy, and it's a challenge, and you'll never forget, you know, the fever dream of a experience that was. But all that hard work led to me giving Tylenol unsupervised, and like I like almost cried because of it, because it was just such a big moment for me. Yeah. And I want people to understand that that's a thing, like that's happening.
It is a thing. I totally understand that.
Yeah. And I wish for those thinking about going into healthcare that that's going to happen. Like, once you know, time doesn't stop. You know, time doesn't end. It's going to continue going. So why not invest in getting your education? Because, you know, what's nice about healthcare is that if you want to make the big money, you go to school. There's no waiting for someone to retire. There's no waiting for a position to open. There's, you know, you want to be an MP, you want to be an RN, you want to be a physician, you go to school for it. And there you are. Your salary reflects. And so, you know, I encourage people to challenge themselves and do it. You know, I started college at 26, 30 now, and I have no regrets. I'm glad I did it. And yeah, that moment in 3 South getting Tylenol was huge.
Yeah. I totally get that. It doesn't matter what the med was, right?
Yeah.
It was like a moment of arrival.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like,
all of
you
those
know,
dreams just came to
Or
fruition
like
right
when
there.
they give you your RN badge for the first time in orientation. It's like, this is it. I've been working 4
Yeah.
years for this moment, and and
It's real.
it's real. Yeah. And here we are. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great story. That's a great story. Lizzie, what story do you have?
I think of like a couple of my patients that I really remember so well. And it's just like the moment where you apply those skills that you learned and you realize something is wrong and this should not be happening. And you're able to like actually help the patient and fix what's wrong. I know there was, I called you in the morning actually after that shift.
Yeah. I will never forget that.
Yes. And I was so worried and I was like, well, I just need to call Regina because she will be able to do something about this. And, that patient ended up going to a higher level of care and eventually ended up leaving. But I just felt so glad that they got the care that they needed. And I felt really kind of proud of myself for
You should
stepping
have.
up and advocating for a patient, because that's really what nursing is about, is your patient, advocating for them, making sure they're receiving the best care possible and making sure they're leaving better than when they got there. And if they're not, they shouldn't be leaving it. And so that was probably when I called you that morning, that was probably my favorite story. And then seeing the resolution for that patient was really, I was very happy. I was so happy to see them better.
I loved getting that phone call. And, as soon as I heard it, I started making a bunch of phone calls only to find that everything had already been taken care of by you. I mean, you put everything into action that was right and necessary and needed for that patient. And I felt like just a proud mama. I really did. I was like, here we have our nursing staff who are doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons for the patients they are serving. And I was just so excited. For you, for the patient to have gotten that phone call, I will share that story with you. I like that one too. Yeah. I like that one too. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming. I just said already, but I could just sit and chat for hours about this. I've learned so much about both of you, especially you. My goodness, and about these stories just always reconnect me, and I'm sure every nurse that's out there that is able to hear and watch these episodes, just reconnect us to the why and to the beauty of nursing. So thank you again. And thank you for joining us for this episode. Until next time, bye-bye.